and welcome to the Surviving Trauma Stories of Hope podcast. Today, I will be joined by Hazel Antiporta from her home in Toronto, Ontario. Hazel is a healing and transformational coach, and she works as a certified hypnotherapist, emotional freedom techniques practitioner, neuro-linguistic practitioner, and time techniques practitioner. Over the past year, she has worked with hundreds of clients, mainly focusing on healing emotional traumas so that they can live a new self-narrative that works for their lifestyle. We will tap into her knowledge and experience in today's episode to find out more about inner child healing and breaking generational trauma. Hazel educates us, and this is what you will learn from our discussion. We touched on her own journey and how it made her choose this career path. We obviously discussed childhood trauma and how it can affect us in our adulthood, generational trauma and how it is passed down from one generation to the other, and of course, how we can break that cycle in our own lives. We also touch on what we can expect from her coaching program. We also learn how hypnotherapy works. This was very interesting for me because I've always been so fascinated by hypnotherapy, but never really knew what it was about. And lastly, how to identify triggers and just so much more. We had such a great time recording this episode. Hazel is a very intuitive and astute person, and she has a pleasant disposition, and I know that you will love her insights and just her beautiful nature. I hope you take some helpful perspectives that can help you on your healing journey. Enjoy the episode, and as always, keep listening. Hi, Hazel. Welcome.
Hello.
And thank you so much for joining me today.
Oh, thank you. Thank you.
How are you doing?
I'm good. I did my morning routine this morning, ate breakfast, and then, got the day started.
Nice. I love routines. I love lists. I love routines. So you're my kind of girl.
Yes.
So we have an interesting topic to discuss today, right? We're going to be talking about healing the inner child and breaking generational trauma.
Yes.
Right.
Let's get into that.
Yeah. So you are a healing and a transformational coach, and you work as a certified hypnotherapist, a EFT practitioner, a NLP, and a time techniques practitioner, right? So that is your business persona.
Yes.
Okay. So for the listeners, tell us a bit more about yourself, like where you live, come from a big family, a small family. Who is Hazel?
Okay. My name is Hazel, and I'm from Toronto, born and raised in Toronto, Ontario. And I grew up in a small family. It was just me, my sister, my mom, and my dad. And we didn't have any intermediate family, as most of them were in like the US or like the Philippines. So it was mostly just us and like family friends. And growing up, because we didn't have that like extended family support, most of the time we had to depend on each other, like each of the family members' role. And sometimes that expectations grew larger than it should have been for like a 10-year-old. Because like certain expectations were put onto you, because you're a kid, you don't really realize that you don't have to pursue those expectations. And because we're kids, we automatically assume that we have to do this in order to be loved, in order to be liked, in order to be seen. And once we start building that narrative, that becomes people pleasing when we're older, right? And that's what happened to me. So I started getting into toxic relationships, and I was always wondering, like, why am I always attracted to this dynamic? And then after I broke up with my last toxic relationship, basically I learned that I was basically repeating cycles of my parents, where I was always trying to search for love where there wasn't love placed. But because of my emotional roller coaster in my childhood, the idea of like walking on shells, that became my narrative. Like, okay, now this is something familiar to me, so I'm going to find this in other people. Yeah.
I find it so interesting because one would think that if there's something that happened in your childhood home, that you would leave that behind. As an adult, you would try and seek something different. But you're saying that that is basically a blueprint within
Basically.
you and you mimic what you saw in your childhood
Yeah.
home.
Yes, exactly that. And because this is our blueprint, this is the idea of like, okay, we only have to associate ourselves with this because this is our familiarity. And the subconscious mind only wants to work in areas that's familiar. But if it sees that, like, oh, this is something new, this is something healthy, our mind is kind of scared of it because it's not familiar to this dynamic. And that's why we end up, even though we end up in healthy relationships, sometimes we might self-sabotage because we're not used to the idea of this love,
Yes.
right?
Like
We
we don't
become
feel like we deserve better than that. And
exact,
we go to our old behavior patterns, something that is familiar.
exactly.
So I know that you have a personal story that led you to this path of becoming a healing and a transformational coach. Do you want to share a little bit of that with us?
Yes, yes, definitely. After my last toxic relationship, I started to really dive deep in. And I actually, one day, I was like breaking point. I was crying. I was just like on the floor and I was like begging, like I was praying to God. And I was like, why is this always happening to me?
What is
And
making
then,
it so toxic, though?
exactly, exactly. And then so I was like writing it down. Like the first time I was journaling was like 5 years ago, 6 years ago. Yeah, 6 years ago. And then I started to notice that every trait of my ex were all similar. They all follow like the same like identity. And then I started to question, like, oh my God, I'm really like dating one person, one type of person. But what is attracting me to this dynamic? And it was certain behaviors like people pleasing, but also like an anxious attachment, ambient attachment. And I started to trickle in and started researching more and noticed that like I was searching for love, waiting for love, because that's how my parents taught me to behave around them. And then
Right.
that's when the healing child comes in to basically like that baby Hazel or baby Marlene was like, oh, I didn't feel loved at age 10. Therefore, I'm going to keep going around this pattern to make sure I get love. But then that's when we go inside my seed method, like mythology, and we kind of take out the emotions attached to that event and tell baby Marlene, like, you're safe. Don't worry. You don't have to chase love this way. And then that's when we
Right.
heal the emotional past and break that cycle.
Okay. So you were basically in relationships that mimicked the relationship that you had with your parents and how the way they taught you how to love or what love
Yeah,
was. And so these toxic relationships, I suppose there would have been cheating or disrespect in these relationships. And so that was what was attracting you to these relationships.
exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly. It's like we always like our mind has a song track, right?
Yeah.
And it'll just keep playing a song track that's similar. Like that's why we like certain songs because it sounds similar to the songs we liked before. And because we have an original like song track in our head, we'll
Yeah.
only associate ourselves with similar song tracks that we've been around.
Right.
Mhm.
Now, you've mentioned your coaching program because I'm curious to know how you go about helping your clients to break this cycle, to
Mhm.
heal that inner child, and to break the generational trauma that they suffer
Exactly.
and endure. So, what is the main focus of your coaching program?
So a lot of the times my like potential clients or even like my clients when we started working together, I don't tell them directly what they need to learn, but rather I show them what they need to discover within themselves. Because most of the time people think that like, oh, he's doing this, he's like he's she or she's doing that. Then that makes me feel like unlovable, or like he's not giving me compliments, or he always looks at girls on social media. But then I retreat that focus back within themselves because at the end of the day, everybody's a mirror reflection of you, right? And when you
Yes.
get triggered, a lot of times that's something you need to learn within yourself and you need to get within yourself. And what we do is basically attract the same cycle over and over again. In order to break that cycle, we need to see what kind of repetitive thoughts are coming in. And then we go back into the seed method and go into your timeline, whether it's generational or just like in this lifetime or past lifetime. And we kind of like give that emotional healing so you can break that cycle and let go of your past. Because the past doesn't exist unless you allow it to with your emotions.
Right. So
Mhm.
it comes down to, really living and focusing on the present,
Exactly.
right? And not
With
really
all the
looking outside for help,
Mhm.
but looking internally.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
Because, for example, those who plan a lot in their future, like, yes, that's a good indication that they know where they're going, but it's also an indication that, like, they need to see where they're going in order to feel safe, in order to feel calm. But at the end of the day, we are safe wherever we are. But that's where inner child healing needs to come in to show that, like, you're good. You can
Yes.
relax. Yeah.
Yes. Yes.
Mhm.
Yeah. I suppose it comes back to that beliefs again that we are taught when we are child. If we are taught not to trust strangers, we might grow up feeling lonely because we don't really
Exactly.
let people in.
Exactly. Exactly. Because maybe our parents are always telling you, oh, don't talk to this person, not don't talk to that person. They're going to hurt you. And then sometimes when we grow up, we forget about those words our parents taught us, but their words become our inner critic. We just start thinking like them. It's like, oh, I can't talk to this person. It's like, wait, who told you you can't?
Yeah.
That's when
Yeah.
awareness starts to come in. Mhm.
Yeah. So when we talk about healing, there has to be a certain amount of awareness. So I assume if somebody hits a rock bottom in their life or they're seeking advice, they already have some sort of awareness. So
Mhm.
how does the inner child healing help them to heal their life?
It's like coming into recognition that you don't need to be dependent on others for the needs you want, and you can find that within yourselves. Because a lot of the times people think that we need a certain amount of validation to know that we're doing good in our lives, or we need a certain amount of love from others to show that we are lovable. But how about filling your own cup so much that it's overflowing, and then coming to idea that, like, I am good enough no matter what anyone says. And because of that, you become like, you have so much unwavering faith and confidence in yourself that you can start pouring it into others. And no matter where you stand, you know that you are safe and you are abundant. And that's like the key to contentment, really.
I've come across inner healing where there are daily practices that most people do, like, daily affirmations, journaling. Do you suggest any of these practices to sort of maintain the work that you've done after you've healed your inner child?
Oh, yes, definitely. It's like, I always tell my clients that, like, even if they're seeing the results within 2 weeks, I tell them that, like, we have to remember you have to keep doing this work consistently, because it's like going to the gym, right? Let's say we went to the gym consistently for 1 month, and then we're finally seeing that abs, that figure we want. But we
Yeah.
always have to make sure that, like, we got to keep working out, still eating correctly, or else if we lose that system, we end up going back to square one.
Yeah.
Right. And
Yes.
that's basically the same as healing. You have to make sure that you still cultivate that, like, time for yourself. Like you said, those systems in the beginning, morning and night, making sure that, like, you're still filling your own cup. And one thing I like to do is looking at your love language, your own love language. So whether it's like giving, like, if you like praises from other people, how about giving that to yourself with like word affirmations right in the morning and right at night before you sleep and once you wake up? So you start telling yourself, like, oh, I am strong. I am this. And that way, when someone tells you, like, oh, you're not good enough, you're like, nope, I am
Yeah.
strong. You become an automatic response. But the only way for words of affirmation to work is to really first do this subconscious work. Because if you say like words of affirmations, we basically tell the conscious mind like a word, but it's going to bounce off. But once we open the subconscious where like the blueprint is, we tell ourselves this and then we plant the seed and we close it. That word of affirmation becomes stronger, right?
So, is that something that you can do for yourself, or is that something that you can help with? Because, I mean, I ask because you're a certified hypnotherapist,
Yes.
right?
Mhm.
And so I'm curious, as a hypnotherapist, what does a session look like?
It's so weird. It's so weird. So I do everything intuitively. Some people like to do it with scripts. I like to do it with like whatever like the person needs. And I would close my eyes and see like, okay, what do they really need? And I would ask God, like, okay, give me like a word or a direction of like where they need to be right now. And then that's when we start the session. And then right after, basically, I just start free flowing and I bring them into like an imagery guided type of hypnosis where they're talking to the inner child. But I tell them, like, you are good enough. Tell baby Marlene that she is so safe right now to like go after her dreams. And they keep saying it over and over again. And the next day, they suddenly like become this new person. And because they do this every week, I'm like, who is this changed? Mhm.
So that's basically what you're saying. You open
Yeah.
the subconscious mind and
Yeah.
you put that affirmation in there
Yeah.
using
Like a plant.
hypnotherapy,
Yeah.
and you
Like a
plant
plant.
the seed, and
Hmm.
in the conscious mind we repeat that in our daily lives.
Exactly. Exactly. And it's like we're basically a beehive, right? And then we all have like working bees that's going to just follow what the queen bee says. The conscious mind is like the working bees. They're just going to follow it. But in order for real action to get in, you just can't tell the working bees like, oh, you have to do this. Because they're obviously like, nah, that's not what the queen bee told us to
The
do.
queen bee, yeah.
Exactly. But once we tell the queen bee, like, you are enough, the queen bee's like, you guys are all enough.
Oh, cool. I like it. So,
Yeah.
I want to come back to the generational trauma because it makes me think of some of the things in my own experience where I have seen the way that my parents were and how I've seen that some of that have played out exactly in my life. And I'm
Yeah.
curious to know, how does it move from generation to generation?
Good question. Do you have a specific example you want to elaborate on?
So, in the relationship that my parents had, there were certain things that happened. But when it came to my relationship, I had the similar beliefs, and
Mhm.
some things happened exactly the same way. And it was
Yeah.
unintentional.
Yeah.
But looking back, I can see, oh my gosh, this is a carbon copy of something that had happened over there. And that's a bit freaky.
Definitely, definitely. I like where you're coming from because my parents, they have like a generational idea on abandonment, and every relationship you'll have, they're going to abandon you, right? And
That's
then,
hectic.
yeah, yeah. And then like my parents, I know that like they're together, but they revolve around this idea of abandonment, and they end up people pleasing each other, which is not a good thing. And I can see how it affected me. But even before that, I have like my family history is just like filled with divorces, and it's just on abandonment, abandonment, and abandonment. And I can see how like this wound has been carried out generationally because of that lack of inner child. Because the inner child is not just within you, but it's an embodiment of what your generational trauma has been through or your generations have been through. So you might be just carrying certain beliefs and wounds that has just been passed down onto you. So like sometimes we might just carry this like heavy belief that like we're not good enough. But even though your parents might have not said that to you directly when you're a child, maybe your grandparents just felt it so heavily that it wasn't healed within them. It was just passed down into you. Because we're all parts of our parents and they're parts of their parents. But
Yes.
because we're all connected, their wounds also transfer onto us. And that's the idea of generational trauma. Because
Yeah.
even if our grandparents, we might not have spoken to them, our parents was affected by them. And subconsciously, their language was also affected by that narrative, which also cycles onto us. But then that's when we go
Yes.
into our inner child and say that, like, baby Joanna, our grandma,
Mm.
and we tell her that, like, it's okay, you can feel safe. We also heal that generational trauma by tuning into our inner child.
Okay. So
And that's how it
everything
starts to
comes
cycle.
back to the inner child.
Yeah.
So the
Yeah.
healing, it starts with the inner child, even when it is generational trauma.
Exactly. At the end of the day, we're all kids. We're just kids that grew up and told to have more responsibilities. But sometimes when we have experiences with certain traumas from the past, we start to react the same way from we did when we're 13 because we didn't process it properly. Right. Because age is all just a construct, but the way we behave, we can't really put an age on it because everybody has different traumatic events that happen different in different lifetimes. And the reason why I focus a lot on inner child healing is because I have an extensive amount of like therapy experiences and also life coaching experiences, and everybody says the same thing. Tell yourself you're enough. Tell yourself you're enough. But to get to the root of when all of these beliefs started manifesting, these traumas, it often comes from childhood. And that's baby you, little
Yeah.
you.
Hazel, you're giving me a lot of information.
You're so funny.
No, it's true. I mean, I'm new to the inner child and healing the inner child and going through that. But I mean, you are really educating me to today.
Thank
It's
you.
true.
Thank you.
It's true. And I'm happy because there are people out there who also, like me, don't know all of this. And
Mhm.
if we can
Mhm.
shed some light on this topic, then yeah, I'm really happy.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely. Because a lot of times we create those cycles, like you said, we create those cycles in a relationship because there's a part of our childhood where the disconnect happens. And because that disconnect happens from like innocent baby Marlene, who was just filled with so much light, to Marlene, who's kind of started like thinking about her future and like, oh, where should she be? This part of baby Marlene starts to realize that like maybe I do have to follow my parents' like mental patterns or behavioral patterns for me to feel safe and loved. And that cycle starts going bigger and bigger and bigger as you grow older. But then once we reconnect that cycle, the shadow work is like, I see how those experiences hurt me, but I am still loved and I know I deserve better.
Right.
Mhm.
So when it comes to a treatment plan, do we start with life coaching? Do we start with
Mhm.
hypnotherapy? Where do we start?
With a lot of people, they like to, I guess, create a structure. But for me, I see that everybody has individual needs. For example, if someone was coming to me with a lot of like external hurt from other people and they were just wounded and like they just felt really low about themselves, I start with hypnotherapy and get them familiar with the idea like, this is you. This is baby you.
Yes.
And the reason why I say that is because a lot of the times, like 9 out of 10, everybody's like, oh, this was so uncomfortable talking to my baby self. But because they were so uncomfortable, that means they've been practicing self abandonment for so long and they weren't taking care of themselves, like in a deep matter.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
also, they were listening to what other people were saying about them and believing it.
Exactly. Exactly. And the reason why we tend to listen what other people say is because we don't trust ourselves, our own advice.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. We think
But
it
at
can't
the
be. You know,
exactly.
I can't deserve all this love. I can't deserve all this unconditional support. I am not
Exactly.
ap, right? And
Exactly.
then we create that narrative for ourselves.
Exactly.
And it's
Exactly. But
reinforced, I suppose, by the outside people who tell
yeah.
us these things.
Yeah. And even as those people are reinforcing those ideas and we kind of get triggered, it's like, okay, wait, because they are saying this to me, that means I don't believe that within me. Right. If they say that, like, oh, I don't deserve love, what made me think that I don't deserve love? Who said this? And that's when you touch base and go inside yourself and tell yourself, ask yourself, like, okay, baby Marlene, what do you need right now? It's like, oh, I want to feel heard. Okay, how do you want to feel heard? I want to go on the swing. I'm like, okay, let's go swing. And that's the reparenting comes in. Knowing that like you still have needs to just play
Yeah.
and feel free to express yourself.
Yeah. And that's a
Mhm.
difficult thing to do.
100%.
Yeah. That
Yeah.
is definitely not easy. I think expressing yourself and retraining yourself to recognize the patterns and
Mhm.
then to change that belief system. That's not an easy thing.
It's not. It's not. But it's knowing that like no matter how cloudy it is, the sun will come up. Because the only thing that will drive this process faster is your faith.
Okay, I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mhm. Because I can tell you by far, like the people who had the most success in like my coaching program were the ones who really trusted me and gave 100% of their work, even though they didn't see it, because they trusted me and they didn't like 50, like one step in, one foot out, they got the most results. But the people who didn't show up for themselves because they were hesitant, it shows that they were hesitant in themselves. It wasn't me. But because of that, they didn't show the results that they wanted.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Because even owning up to some of these things for yourself, I think some people will just back out.
100%. 100%. But it's knowing that if you want to get better, do you deserve better? And that's when breaking the cycle starts.
Yeah. And I mean, I find with deservability in my own experience, you do take 10 steps forward and 5 steps back.
Exactly.
It's like this healing thing. It doesn't just happen. It doesn't, just come to fruition. And after 10 sessions, it's done. You think you've dealt with it and you think you've moved on and you deserve. And then you just get, like you said earlier, you get triggered, right? And then you go back to what is safe and what feels familiar.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. Oh gosh. I had it this week. It was terrible.
No, exactly that. Exactly that. Because like imagine we go to the gym and like we work out, we get the abs we want, but then oops, an injury comes in. First, we learn how to avoid a certain workout or posture or form, but we have to remember that we got to keep going. Because at the end of the day, it's like not looking at what hurts in the moment, but what's better in the long run.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So yes, it might hurt in the moment. It might hurt to pick up like weights, but this is going to be fun. You're going to love this.
Yeah.
So
And
this
I
is
think
where
there
this
must
journey.
be that investment in your own healing, in your own growth.
Yes, yes, exactly. Because a lot of the time people think that like, oh, they're not showing me this amount of love. They're not doing this. But it's just like, okay, so how can we feel that within you so you don't become dependent on others? You're just feeling so safe and like at flow, but you're still like determined and at ease with whatever you do. Is giving that unconditional love to yourself when unconditional love wasn't present when you're younger.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Codependency comes to mind right now.
Exactly. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Oh, that is another roller coaster and a very difficult one to get out of.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Having that, being in a codependent relationship.
Yeah, definitely. Because a lot of times, like, oh my God, my past experiences, I felt like I would die if I was going to break up with my last relationship. And even though like he did a lot of things that hurt me, I felt like this was all I can get. But it's that idea like, oh, I self-abandoned my needs so long. I started to depend on something so small, but made it seem like it was the world to me.
Yeah.
Right.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah.
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 And it's so hard to untangle yourself from that.
Exactly. Exactly.
Yeah.
But once you start to untangle yourself, you start to see that like, oh, it wasn't that bad. I just need to jump.
Well, I mean, you managed to do that. You managed to walk away and build a beautiful career out of that experience.
Thank you.
And also invest in others and help others, which is amazing.
Yeah, thank you.
I always commend people who can take their own personal hurt and hardship and turn it into something positive and then help others. So I wanted to ask you about NPL. I've only ever met one other person, in fact, here in Cape Town, who, he's a neuro-linguistic practitioner. So how do you apply that in your practice?
Okay, so NLP and Time Techniques, they're both a branch of NLP. And basically, they're neuro-linguistic programming, and they help you rewire certain narratives and break certain thought patterns, right? And so basically, I kind of combined those two with hypnosis to create my own modality around the inner child. And I don't directly use like the certifications. I have like combined everything all at once to find like the most effective technique. Cause I was like spending months and months before I started like my coaching business, just trying to like record myself and see what was the most effective. But like a lot of the times, like the neuro-linguistic kind of focused on the conscious thought. Like it was only getting to the working bees. It would happen, like the change happened instantly, but it was only temporary. But I found that like the most effective way was to get into the root and then start doing NLP around the root.
That
So
queen
we can
bee.
take it out. Exactly. Exactly. And then by doing that, I also focus a lot on the holistic part of lifestyle. So like the mind, body, and soul, we're making sure that your seed is thriving with the proper garden bed and the proper nutrition is coming in. Because I don't want to plant a seed where like it's growing in an alleyway, right?
Yeah.
There's no sun,
Yes.
it's just like
Yes.
concrete. I want to make sure like you are good where you are.
Yeah. You are
Yeah,
nourished. Yeah.
exactly.
Okay. So where do I sign up for my first session?
No, come to my website. Come to my website.
Okay. So we're going to get to the website in a second. So
Okay.
tell me, do you have any success stories that you want to share with us?
Yes. Oh my God, I have a lot. Like all of my clients, I really don't recognize them. The longest one I've been working with was for 7 months. And I'm telling you, by far, I wish it sounds a bit narcissistic, but I'm very confident. I wish I had like my healing modalities, someone doing it to me, because this took me like 5 years and I just saw the change all happen in 3 months.
Wow.
One of my clients, her inner critic was so strong and her like self-sabotage was so strong. Like she would drink every day. And then after 1 month, I started to see that like she's not only started to stick up for herself, but she quit 2 of her old jobs that neglected her. She also signed a copywriting business. Now she's an author and she's going to publish her book in 2 months.
Wow.
And then another client, he was on the brink of bankruptcy with his business. And the only thing holding him was his podcast. And as he was losing so much, like he was going through divorce, everything, after 1 month, he got into the Oscars, like the Oscars invited him for his brand. And then when he came
In
back, he
Hollywood.
signed, yeah. And then he came back. And well, from that event, he sold $100,000 worth of his products to celebrities. And when he came back, he signed a $2 million contract with a company that will endorse his products.
Oh my gosh. That's
Yes.
fantastic.
But his idea was that he had to be codependent on others to help him succeed. But once I showed him that he is enough to stand on his own, and as we were starting to work with the mind, body, and soul and the different like healing modalities, he was able to show that like I am enough. I don't need to be dependent on other people. I don't need to be dependent on my ex. I don't need to hold on to my marriage to know that I am loved. Right. And once he
Yeah.
started to realize that and like cultivate those morning and night routines, he started to show up for himself. And that's all that matters at the end, how you show up for yourself and what mindset you're in when you show up.
Yeah. And these two examples are so interesting because they're so different.
So
And it just goes
different.
to show that, when you have, when you're experiencing those challenges in your life, they show up in all different other areas. They show up in your home relationships, they show up in your work relationships. There really isn't an area that is unaffected.
No, no.
You
Because those
know?
triggers can be responded through different perspectives. That's all it is. But once we heal that trigger, those different responses will be like, will just dissolve. And just
Yeah.
imagine how peaceful your life would be without those triggers. Because you know that you're good enough. You know that you're safe. You know that you're safe to play with whatever dreams you have.
Yeah. So, how do you identify your triggers? Is that just through the awareness? So,
Awareness,
if I
definitely.
know this is my problem, I'm an alcoholic, for argument's sake. I
Mm-hmm.
know my triggers are not to walk into bars. And if I
Yeah,
do that, I must know how to act when I go in there.
exactly.
Is it just so is it just about having the awareness about the
Yeah,
trigger and then knowing how to handle it?
exactly that. And even let's take this a step further. What triggers that desire to drink? It's like, oh, well, my girlfriend just texted me and she started throwing arguments with me. Now I want to drink. Okay, now you're using drinking as a problem to run away from your emotion. That's avoidance. What about your girlfriend is making you run away? It's like, oh, because she always tells me I'm doing this, this, and this, and this. Okay, well, what does that make you feel? I'm not enough. Who told you you're not enough? Because my parents used to do this to me when I was younger. And that my parents may have like alcoholic problems. It's like, okay, now you're following the old cycle from your parents. And now we have to break that with your inner child. And then that's when the mind, body, like and soul habitual practices we're going to be implementing to help you also change that with the working bees.
Okay. And so that's where the daily practices, the continual practices comes in to help you
Exactly.
maintain that healthy mindset.
Exactly. And then the week after, as we focus on the childhood, we're going to also focus on the idea of like running away through another perspective. Like, okay, where else did you run away when you're little? Oh, maybe at school when I was bullied. So then I would also go and eat a lot. It's like, okay, you're avoiding through foods, not just
Yes.
alcohol, but food. And it's like, okay, now let's heal baby you when you got bullied in school.
Yeah.
So it's like chipping off the iceberg of
Absolutely.
running.
And I've heard
Mm-hmm.
it before, with people who have suffer from depression, alcoholism. And when you start this process, some of the time, it's really the tip of the
Yeah.
iceberg that you start to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it's really
Yeah.
what underneath that needs to heal. And that's why we are so happy that we have you.
Thank you. Thank you. But yes, it's like knowing that awareness, like you said, knowing that there's an iceberg behind you. But now it's like how much is that iceberg weighing you down? Now we have to look within and see how big it is. And then we start chipping from the bottom up.
Yes.
But when we start chipping from the bottom up, it's more effective because like as we start breaking it harder and harder, at the end it's going to all crumble down.
Yes. So if the listeners want to get hold of you or they want to reach out and make use of your services, which
Yes.
I highly recommend,
Thank you.
where can we find you?
Yes, you can find me on my website, which is project and then Antiporta, Antiporta.com. Or you can find me on IG, Instagram, which is Project Antiporta, and then also my YouTube channel, Hazel Antiporta. And I show you a lot of goods there that will help you guys like become aware of your problems and how you can fix them.
Nice. I'm going to link it in the show notes so that everyone can get it.
Thank you.
For real, yes. Hazel, any last words that you want to leave the audience with?
Yes. One thing I've been learning a lot from my clients and might help you guys too is that in order for you to feel that love you desire from others, we have to look within and see that as a mirror so we can give that to ourselves. Like as we expect like unconditional love from others, we have to give that to ourselves.
Yeah. So Hazel, thank you so much for joining me. I'm glad that I had this chat with you. It was so much fun. Yes.
Yes, it was
I learned so much today about inner child healing. You've really educated me, and I'm sure that the listeners are going to enjoy our episode. Take care.
Thank you. Bye.
That wraps up this podcast episode. Thank you for listening. If you enjoy my podcast, please take a minute to give me a rating and review in Apple Podcasts. Please subscribe in your favorite podcast directory so you don't miss an episode. Please consider following My Centered Life on Facebook and Instagram for daily inspiration. Thank you so much for spending this time with me. You can catch me again in the next episode. Same time, same place. Sending you lots of love and light. Bye.